Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, are you living a spiritual life? Or maybe I should say, can you live a spiritual life in such a chaotic, confusing, material world? How do we do that? Well, we're going to learn more about that because we're going to talk with the author of a great book called Living a Spiritual Life in a Material World. Sounds like what we just talked about. 4 keys to fulfillment and balance. So I'm so glad that we have the author of this book on our show, Anna Gatmon. Anna, welcome to Energy Stew.
Peter, thanks for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's talk about this way of juggling our spiritual nature, our spiritual life, spiritual purpose, all that stuff, with all the onslaughts of materiality.
Yeah.
So, and you have great insights into this book on how to do that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that counter to common belief in spiritual teachings, or in some of them, we are meant to have a material experience. We're not meant to transcend it and only be in the spiritual. We are meant to have a material experience because each one of us is a point of consciousness on this planet. And as a point of consciousness, we're a portal for spiritual wisdom and its material expression through our unique vision, capabilities, calling, personality. And so we have the capacity as a human species to travel between imagining and creating, the spiritual, the material, dreaming, manifesting. And so to deny us that and to value the spiritual over the material has created a lot of suffering.
Right. And in my life, many times I look at it and go, am I on the wheel or off the wheel? And very often when I'm caught up and not recognizing my spirituality, I'm on the wheel and caught in the wheel of life and not having the perspective that you bring to our lives through, recognizing these 4 keys that you talk about.
Yeah. So really, the more we go into the material world only, the more we experience the separateness. But because we have the capability to travel between the spiritual and the material as a portal for the two of them, the experiment, the human or the experiment of planet Earth is how to bring spiritual qualities, spiritual wisdom into our material world and every day. So not just on a retreat every 3 months, but while you're driving down the highway and while you're cooking dinner and while we're having this conversation and while we're creating, the technology that allows us to talk from across the country. All of that, how do we bring the spiritual essence into our material existence is the big question and the big task that we as humans, I think, need to do.
For those of us who want to. So many people are totally unconscious and perhaps even think that being spiritual is just following a dogmatic religion and following its rules.
Right.
And therefore they're obeying God, and therefore that takes care of their spirit.
So first of all, there's a lot, who are spiritual but not religious. Many of the young people, they're looking for meaning and purpose, but they don't want to follow a specific faith. And so spirituality and individual practice has come out of that. And we're in a market where we can pick and choose and create our own resonance. But I think it's the human experiment is to bring the spiritual into the material, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think that part of the problem that so many people don't want to go to the spiritual because they bought into the belief that I bought into, that in order to be truly spiritual, I have to give up material pleasures and live without any material desires and needs and live a very humble life. And so, I had lived in Paris and worked as a fashion model, and I had learned over a decade to appreciate the beauty, spiritual quality, the dedication, the love, the hard work, the innovation, the creativity of craftsmanship, which France is so well known for. if it's baking bread or cakes or gardening or theater or art or fashion, architecture, these are all creations of the human spirit. And all the qualities that I mentioned right now are spiritual qualities. Beauty, dedication, hard work, focus, doing something out of love, serving somebody else, doing it for the purpose of just creating and offering somebody something that is to the perfection that you can do. These are all spiritual qualities. So I was kind of torn between, I'm not spiritual enough because I experience elation, and we all do when we listen to classical music or the music that we love, or we read poetry. Poetry is words, usually it's words, on a piece of paper. A book is material, but it awakens our spirit. So many people, I think, are afraid of spirituality because they think they're going to have to change their life completely instead of just integrated into their daily material living.
And that's so much what I like about the way you're approaching this, is that it helps us understand what spirituality is in the first place. It's really an awareness of the bigger picture of our journey on a planet that has a lot of richness to it.
Sure.
And so so many people think of spirituality as just being spiritually directed towards meditation or yoga, and they don't see it as you can be totally spiritual just riding in like a subway car in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And just admiring all of these souls that are on spiritual journeys. Every different kind. And this is all, let's call it, God work. There's so many other or work of creation and many other labels that people want to apply to, the higher oneness of that we're all here representing in unique sparks of it.
Yeah.
And so, it's really helpful to read your book about recognizing the way that we can use our spirituality all the time so that we don't have to lose it. We don't have to, meditate and then get lost in the jungle.
Yeah.
I've interviewed people. I even had a good friend many years ago who, these are very evolved spiritual beings who have spent months, if not in one case, and years in another case, in isolation, in caves, in the Himalayas, meditating successfully, in great bliss for many, many, many hours at a time, and then have to come out of the cave and face this real world that's not quite cave-like. So what do we do? How do we do it? And a lot of people fail at that because they want to differentiate the two too much.
I think we have a very narrow definition of a lot of things. So we even have a narrow definition of spiritual practice. And I've spoken and worked with so many people who feel I can't get myself to do 20 minutes of meditation, emptying my mind. 20 minutes a day, it's no big deal. What is 20 minutes? And so many people are struggling, and as a result, feel they're not spiritual enough.
Well, I did a show.
Narrow perspective of what spiritual practice is, right?
I did a show recently on the art of contemplation, which is much more spiritual than the idea of forced meditation that you're not comfortable with, sitting there while you're watching your mind play with you. And thinking, I don't know if I'm getting spirituality out of this or not.
Right, yeah. So I think that expansiveness, and that's the underlying characteristics for me of all spiritual experiences, and I talk about that in my book, that is the key. An expanded perspective on what spiritual practice is. So if you take qualities or emotions, it's one words, or inner peace, joy, compassion, excitement, enthusiasm. Each one of these words has its own intelligence. We know how to recognize pain from fear and enthusiasm from delight and compassion from anger. We know, so therefore it has an identity. And if we decide to focus every day on a different quality and decide that today we're going to practice on perceiving that quality, experiencing it and expressing it, while we go about our day, suddenly we're practicing throughout our day, and we can use this material icon, you know, our smartphones, to ring and remind us every 5 minutes, every 30 minutes, 3 times a day, it's time. So let's say I pick the quality of beauty today. And you know, every hour it rings for me. And every hour I stop and I just look around. What can I see that's beautiful today, right around me? And acknowledge it, you know, say, this is beautiful. I see your beauty. You could be at the park having lunch and suddenly your eye is drawn to a leaf, a dying leaf that has beautiful red, yellow, orange colors. And for that second, you're connected to source because you're kind of attuning to the beauty of this leaf. And for that moment, you're there. You don't have to go to the other side of the planet to have this moment. It's right here.
But what about the beauty of what we bump into in life? What about expansive consciousness about what we trip over?
So you're saying the things that are challenging for us.
Right. In other words, to see I mean, one thing that I'm thinking about, but it's too easy, is that I tripped one time on the sidewalk on Broadway in New York, and flying right onto my face on the sidewalk.
Wow.
And I was sure that my life was going to change at that moment because too much would be damaged.
Yeah.
And it would be, it would distort my life. Turned out that I had almost no damage at all, and it didn't make sense. So there was something seemingly transformative about that experience.
Yeah.
To understand that somehow I was protected, and I don't understand how it could be that way because I had to have hurt myself and I didn't.
But you see, that is a lesson. And so the challenges, what we call challenges, are opportunities for lessons. And it's hard when we're in them. It feels like I don't want to be having this experience. But there's a lesson. It's not about, spirituality is not always in being in inner peace and always in delight and always in joy. It's being present to whatever there is. And I love your example of falling, because my mom fell when she was living in New Jersey. And my mom is an alcoholic. I mean, she's 92 years old. So, you know, she's in a memory care unit. So she's not drinking now, but she was an active alcoholic for many years. And she tripped down the stairs in New Jersey and fell and was in hospital for 4 days. And I decided that she was probably drunk, and she doesn't care how she walks. I had all this thing that I had laid on her. Okay. The week after it had happened to her, I was walking in my garden. The grass was flat. And within a second, there was a little hole, and I tripped and I fell.
Right.
For me, I said, wow, a second ago, I hadn't fallen, and a second after. I'm telling you, the universe was teaching me a lesson. I put so much shit, if I may, on my mom, on her falling, that the universe showed me how easy it is to fall like this for anybody.
Right.
And so for me, so that was my lesson. For somebody else, it's going to be something else. But for my lesson, when it happened a week after my mom fell, it was like, you were judging her so harshly. And look how easy it is for you. You're stable, you're okay. And look in your garden, your flat lawn, and you're tripping completely. I just fell. Right. So there's lesson. The challenges are lessons, and some are hard, and some take a long time. But they're all lessons. Everything. If you're an entrepreneur, that's your spiritual practice. If you're a healer, that's your spiritual practice. If you're an accountant, that's your spiritual practice, because an accountant, counter to common belief that it's a boring job, if you look on this an expansive perspective, an accountant creates order and peace and tranquility in an organization. And order, tranquility, and peace are spiritual qualities.
Right.
And they serve by creating a balance. They create balance, right? They balance the account, so they create balance, and they help the company to grow, to serve. Look, these are all spiritual qualities, and yet an accountant walks around, and in our entire culture feel that being an accountant is like a boring thing. What if an accountant walked around feeling like, I bring peace to the world, I bring balance to the world?
But we can all actually say that about our own lives, because we're all trying to fix things all the time.
Yeah.
Fix things so that we can be happier and other people can be happier.
Yeah.
And in ways that, might not be agreeable to others, how we make ourselves happy or not. But at least to ourselves, we're trying to fix things in ways that every soul is here for. And that's a spiritual purpose in life, is to find light somehow. Yeah. And advance the soul consciousness, advance the universe. But you and I are talking about a more aware, mindful approach to our spirituality that sees, the truth, beauty, and goodness in everything that we can. For instance, right now our world, our country is in chaos, and it's very difficult. And we say, oh, it certainly can't be in divine order. Yeah. And yet it is. And yet it's a divine order of confronting us with challenges that our spirit is striving to overcome. So that's highly spiritual.
Right, because as a culture, as long as the politics were calmer, we could stay asleep and just live our life. There's such contrast now, such extremity, that we have to work harder to deny it. And those of us who are not denying it are waking up and saying, this is not okay. This is not in integrity with my values as a human being, as a nation, as a citizen of the planet. This is the amount of violence we need in order to wake up, us who are waking up. So it's crazy.
Exactly.
But this is what we need.
And even people who aren't waking up to this, perhaps are even causing it, are on spiritual paths that just take a lot longer.
Yeah. And cultures move slower, but if you look at the process of a person, if something comes up in your life and suddenly you have 3 months of a therapeutic process that's really painful, a memory from your childhood, something really, it takes a while, and it looks ugly, or you might be activated and be angry and lash out at someone. All of these are part of your process, and it's happening right now, not only in the US, but in the whole world. I mean, I come from Israel, and it's pretty bad there, the situation, right? And Venezuela and Europe, like everywhere, this is happening. It's scarier because we go, what if we don't make it? But in the process, you and I are talking, and someone like Marianne Williamson is running for president and changing the conversation together with many other candidates. And we're doing what we need to do right now at this moment, and we cannot do anymore, and we don't know where to lead.
And I think the essence here is to be mindful that it's all a spiritual path, and to each of us seek to make the most of it that we can by understanding it. So the more we understand it, the more we can make better choices.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what's in your book, is how to choose using the 4 keys that you present, which are expanded presence. So it's like seeing the spirit in everything. Expand the presence of reality. Attentive listening really is challenging all of your different mind levels to be aware of things, especially our intuition, our higher knowing, inner knowing, that can listen the best. Then inspired action, which is also a knowing of what action to take based on what our listening taught us. And then the faith-filled knowing that is the fourth key is being able to see the big picture of what everything we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And to surrender. Actually, I think faith-filled knowing is surrendering.
Yeah. To
And
the reality, to the reality.
yeah, right.
The expansive reality, not to the narrow one of our senses, but to a larger reality.
Right. To the combination of spiritual and material together.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people look at duality as like a bad thing. And we want to get back to oneness and escape from duality.
Yeah.
And we, as you said earlier, we really only learn from duality.
Yeah, because that's how we know the difference between good and bad, right?
Right. And we wouldn't even know oneness if there wasn't a duality to challenge us to seek it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like, even in spiritual teachings, there's the duality of the egoic mind and the non-dual mind. And, to live on this planet, you need a strong ego. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. So ego is not just a bad thing, right? It helps you live on this planet and function.
Right. And then there are understandings and skills of how to listen to your ego versus listening to your soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't know, because often our ego really wants to dominate our thoughts.
Yeah.
And can lead us into all kinds of crazy directions. That's also spiritual. Our ego is only part of our spirituality. It's just the nature of it that gets us confused.
So the thing that I discovered through my research and self-inquiry and work with other people is that so underlying all spiritual experiences is this sense of expansiveness. We might experience it and call it different words and different terms, but it's an expansive sensation that sometimes in nature we'll have this expansive sense that we're part of something larger. We'll have emotions that relate to love from in different variations of it. So even creativity is a form of love because it's allowing creativity to flow through us. And it's on a thought level, it's having more possibilities and more choices and seeing the interdependence, like a map on like an old map where you see the entire connection between the city, whereas when you look at your GPS, you only see, the next, whatever it is, like 50, whatever it is, like yards or like 1 kilometer. So it's just a larger perspective. And all sages, saints, spiritual teachers reside in long periods of time in this expansive state of consciousness. And so the whole book was really, and the 4 keys were really about, okay, how can we mortals learn to expand our consciousness in simple ways so it's not something amorphous and really unclear. So in the book, I explain, how you can expand your consciousness through gratitude, through your breath, through the power of words, through self-expression, so that you have a sense experience of how easy it is to expand your consciousness. And then the second thing I realized through my research was that once you expand your consciousness, an interesting thing occurs. You become aware of information that was not available for you a second ago when you were in a more constricted state of mind. And that information shows up what we call intuitively. It shows up as a holistic whole idea. Oh my God, why didn't I think of that before? This makes all the sense in the world. It comes many times as a flash, like as a total idea. And it comes that way because we have expanded our being, our consciousness, and we become unconsciously aware of more possibilities, which we call our intuition. And so attentive listening is really not about working hard. Let me hear if the universe is talking to me. It's really about doing this short practice of expansion of the first key and then kind of relaxing into an attentive listening. Right. And allowing the universe and our inner wisdom to talk to us.
And yet some of us who are designed to be even more intuitive can receive information as requested. And I do that. I have I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and very often they come to me because they've painted themselves into a corner. They have no idea what the answer is. And I don't either, but I tune in to a higher, and it's amazing the information that comes in that I had no idea personally. My mind couldn't have figured it out. But the universe delivers solutions, and I go, oh, look at that, here's the solution. And it's amazing.
But I would say that your capacity to do that is not different than what I just explained. You reside more often and have easier access to the expansive perspective, and you trust it. Yeah. So you're listening because the universe is talking to us all the time.
Right.
And
right,
so
but I meant, right, and I said at first that those of us who really have worked on our intuition.
Yeah.
But normally our intuition is available to everybody. We're all multidimensional beings, just not aware of it.
Yeah.
So we're really running out of time. It's amazing how fast these shows go when they're so exciting. This is wonderful talking with you. Is there a website?
Yes, so there's two websites. You can just go to my website, which is annagatmon.com, ANNAGATMON. That's my website. And then I just opened the door on this expansive membership community, which you can join, where we practice together how to expand our consciousness in daily situations.
Wow.
And that is expansive.community, just expansive.community, and you can join us.
That's wonderful. This is so great talking with you. And
it's been a pleasure. I could go on and on. I think there's so much.
Well, maybe we'll do another show sometime soon and talk more about spirituality.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Anna Gatmon, thank you so much for being on Energy Stew. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.fm. I can be reached at peter@heartriver, HEART river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.